Christmas night. John sat frozen in his wheelchair as his blind date stood up in the crowded restaurant, her chair scraping against the floor loud enough to make nearby tables turn and look. "You're not my type," Vanessa said, and there was no apology in her voice, no mercy in her eyes, just cold assessment, like she'd just decided he wasn't worth the effort of sitting down. She grabbed her coat from the back of the chair she never actually used, and walked out through the front door where red and green Christmas lights blinked in the windows like they were mocking him. No explanation, no pretense of politeness. Just gone. A single dad, rejected again. John sat there surrounded by families eating holiday dinners and couples holding hands across tables decorated with small wreaths and candles, and the humiliation felt like something alive crawling up his throat. This was the third blind date in 2 months. The third woman who took one look at the wheelchair and the department store suit and decided she had better options waiting somewhere else. Before we continue, make sure to like and tell me in the comment where you are watching from. He reached for his water glass, but his hand shook so badly he left it there, and instead he gripped the wheelchair's armrests and prepared to leave this restaurant and go home to Maya, who was probably still awake waiting to hear about the pretty lady who might want to be part of their family. What was he supposed to tell her this time? John released the brake on his wheelchair and started to turn toward the exit. But then a woman's voice cut through the noise of the restaurant, clear and calm and directed straight at him. "Can you be my new husband?" John turned, stunned, certain he'd misheard over the Christmas music playing through the speakers. A woman sat at the table beside him, and she looked completely out of place in this casual restaurant with its plastic menus and paper napkins. Dark blonde hair pulled back, tight, sharp black suit that probably cost more than his monthly rent, the kind of presence that belonged somewhere with white tablecloths and wine lists thick as phone books. Sloane Vance sat alone with an untouched glass of wine in front of her, looking straight at him with ice-blue eyes that didn't blink. "I'm sorry, what?" John managed to say. "I need a husband," Sloane said, and her voice was precise and controlled, like she was making a business proposal in a boardroom. "You clearly need someone who won't walk out on you in the middle of a restaurant on Christmas night." She gestured at the empty chair across from John where Vanessa had been standing 60 seconds ago. "We can help each other." John stared at her, his brain trying to catch up with what was happening. "I don't even know you." "Sloane Vance." She didn't offer her hand, or smile, or do any of the things people normally do when they introduce themselves to strangers. "My parents are forcing me into an arranged marriage that will destroy my life. I need someone they'll hate, someone they can't control or use for their political games." She looked at his wheelchair with an expression that wasn't pity or disgust, but something closer to calculation. "You're perfect," she said. John felt something hot rise in his chest, anger mixed with confusion, mixed with the lingering sting of Vanessa's rejection. Perfect for what exactly? "You're broke based on your clothing. You have a child, which adds complexity. You're in a wheelchair, which creates social stigma." Sloane leaned forward slightly. "My mother will have a complete breakdown. My father will threaten to disown me. And I'll finally be free from their control." The restaurant noise faded into background static as John processed what this stranger was offering. "What do I get?" he asked. "Everything you need," Sloane replied. "Your daughter's school, your bills, a place to live, medical care, whatever it takes." She paused. "All you have to do is show up when I need you and play the part." John looked at this woman in her expensive suit making an insane proposal on Christmas night, and he thought about Maya waiting at home, about the eviction notice on his door, about Vanessa's footsteps echoing away from him. Could this Christmas night be the beginning of a new family? Would you marry a stranger to save your child's future. Maya's painting covers half the kitchen table when John walks through the door at midnight, and she's supposed to be asleep, but instead she's sitting there in her princess pajamas with purple paint on her fingers and hope shining in her eyes like she's waiting for Christmas morning. "Did you meet her?" Maya asks, before John can even take off his coat. "Did you meet the princess who's gonna love us?" John's chest tightens because he doesn't know how to explain what happened tonight. Doesn't know how to tell his 6-year-old daughter that one woman walked out on them and another woman offered to buy them like they're products on a shelf. He wheels himself to the table and looks at Maya's painting, at the stick figures holding hands under a crooked yellow sun, and one of the figures is sitting in a rectangle with wheels, while the other stands tall wearing what looks like a crown made of gold triangles. "That's you," Maya says, pointing at the wheelchair figure with a paint-stained finger. "And that's the lady who's going to make everything better." The doorbell rings at exactly 3 p.m. the next day, and John opens it to find Sloane Vance standing in his hallway, wearing jeans and a sweater instead of the black dress from last night. Her hair falls loose around her shoulders, and she looks almost normal except for the way she holds herself, like every muscle in her body is coiled tight and ready for something. "You're early," John says. "I'm exactly on time," Sloane replies. And she steps into the small apartment without waiting for an invitation, her eyes scanning the cramped space with the peeling paint and the second-hand furniture John bought from the thrift store downtown. She doesn't flinch or wrinkle her nose or show any sign of judgment. She just looks at everything with that same calculating expression from the restaurant. Maya appears from her bedroom with paint still under her fingernails and her hair in 2 uneven pigtails because John's not good at doing hair yet, and she plants herself directly in front of Sloane with her hands on her hips. "Are you the princess?" Maya asks. "No," Sloane says, and her voice is flat and honest in a way that makes John respect her a little. "I'm the woman who's going to marry your father for reasons that have nothing to do with love." Maya tilts her head like she's thinking about this, and then she nods once. "Okay. Do you like art?" "I tolerate it," Sloane says. "Good enough. Come look at what I made." Maya grabs Sloane's hand without hesitation, without fear, and drags her toward the kitchen table where yesterday's painting has dried into something permanent. Sloane lets herself be pulled, and John follows in his wheelchair, watching this strange interaction unfold between his daughter and a woman who offered to buy their cooperation less than 24 hours ago. Maya explains the painting with the kind of serious concentration that only children can manage, talking about how the purple represents royalty and the gold represents important things, and the stick figures are holding hands because that's what families do. Sloane listens without interrupting, without checking her phone, without doing any of the things busy people do when they're pretending to pay attention to children. And something about the way she stands there makes John wonder if maybe there's more to her than the Ice Queen routine. "The crown means you're important," Maya says, pointing at the tall stick figure. "But you're holding Daddy's hand, so that means you're choosing to be nice even though you don't have to." Sloane's jaw tightens for just a second, and John sees something flicker across her face before the mask comes back. "I'm not nice, Maya. Nice is for people who have time to care about other people's feelings." "That's okay," Maya says, with the kind of wisdom that shouldn't exist in someone so small. "Mean people don't listen when kids talk about their art, so you can't be mean either." The next 3 weeks happen faster than John expects. Like someone pressed the fast-forward button on his life and forgot to ask if he was ready. Sloane shows up every single day at different times, sometimes in the morning before Maya goes to school, sometimes in the evening when homework needs to be done, and she never calls ahead or asks permission. She just appears like she's checking on an investment she made. She helps Maya with her reading homework one Tuesday afternoon, her perfectly manicured nails holding a purple crayon as she traces letters on practice paper, and her voice stays patient even when Maya gets frustrated and wants to quit. She stays for dinner that night without being asked, Eating the frozen pizza John heats up in the oven without complaining about how the cheese is burned on one side and still cold on the other. She reads bedtime stories in her boardroom voice that makes Goodnight Moon sound like a corporate presentation about nocturnal economics. But Maya doesn't seem to care because someone is reading to her. Someone is there and present and not looking at their phone while pretending to listen. John watches from the doorway one night as Sloane tucks Maya into bed, pulling the blanket up to her chin with movements that are precise but not unkind. And Maya looks up at her with sleepy eyes. "Why do you live in a small house when you have so much money?" Maya asks, her voice already drifting toward sleep. "Because small things are easier to protect," Sloane says quietly, and her hand smooths Maya's hair back from her forehead in a gesture that looks almost maternal. "When you have small things, you know exactly what you need to keep safe. Protect from what? From people who want to take them away and use them for something else." John wheels backward from the doorway before they notice him listening, and he sits in the living room with his hands folded in his lap, wondering what kind of life Sloane must have lived to talk about protection and safety like they're the same thing as love. Late at night, after Maya falls asleep, Sloane sits on the couch with her laptop open and her face lit by the cold blue glow of the screen, working on things John doesn't ask about because he's not sure he wants to know. He brings her tea she never requested, just sets it on the coffee table beside her elbow, and she drinks it without looking up or saying thank you or acknowledging that he did something thoughtful. "You don't have to stay this late," John says one night, when the clock hits 11 and she's still typing away at something that makes her forehead crease with concentration. "I know," Sloane replies, and her fingers don't stop moving across the keyboard. But she stays anyway, night after night. Like the apartment with peeling paint and second-hand furniture is somehow more comfortable than whatever mansion she lives in across town. One night, Maya wakes up screaming from a nightmare about monsters under her bed, and John wheels toward her room as fast as he can. But Sloane gets there first, even though she was working on the couch just seconds ago. She's already sitting on Maya's bed when John arrives, already holding his daughter and rocking her gently, and Maya's tears soak into Sloane's expensive cashmere sweater while she whispers things John can barely hear. "It's okay. You're safe. It's not real. I won't let anything hurt you," Sloane says, and her voice is so different from the Ice Queen tone she uses everywhere else that John almost doesn't recognize it. Maya's small hands grip Sloane's sweater like she's holding onto a life raft in the middle of the ocean, and Sloane doesn't pull away or check her watch or act like this is an inconvenience. She just sits there and rocks and whispers until Maya's breathing evens out and sleep pulls her back under. John watches from the doorway, invisible and unnecessary, and he sees something that terrifies him more than Vanessa's rejection or the eviction notice or any of the other disasters currently destroying his life. The Ice Queen is melting, and she doesn't even know it's happening. One Thursday afternoon, Sloane arrives with grocery bags from the expensive market downtown, the kind of place John used to shop before the accident and the medical bills and the complete destruction of everything he built. She unpacks fresh vegetables and real meat and bread from the bakery Maya loves, and she does it all without explaining why or asking for permission, like she's decided this apartment is partly hers now. "You don't have to do this," John says, watching her arrange tomatoes in a bowl on the counter. Sloane looks at him with those ice blue eyes that don't give anything away. "I want to." "Why?" She doesn't answer, just turns back to the cutting board and starts slicing tomatoes with the kind of precision that suggests she learned to cook in expensive classes taught by people with French accents. John realizes something that makes his stomach drop, like he's falling from a great height, without a parachute to slow him down. She's falling in love with the poor, paralyzed single dad, with the man who has nothing to offer, except a cramped apartment and a daughter who needs a mother and a heart that still works even though his legs don't. She has absolutely no idea who he really is. No idea about the estate across town with 12 bedrooms and a view of the city skyline. No idea about Elliott Financial Group or the billions sitting in accounts she'll never see. No idea that this whole thing started as an experiment to see if she was different from people like Vanessa. The experiment is working too well, and John doesn't know how to stop it without destroying everything. That night, an envelope arrives in the mail, heavy cardstock with gold lettering that announces its importance before you even open it. The Vance Annual Gala, this Saturday evening, black tie required, and the invitation is addressed to both of them like the world already knows about their arrangement. Sloane holds the envelope like it's a live grenade that might explode if she moves wrong, and her hands shake for the first time since John met her. "They know," she says, and her voice is quiet in a way that makes the words more frightening than if she'd shouted them. "Know what?" John asks. "That I'm serious about you. That this isn't just me being rebellious or trying to get attention." Her hands crumple the invitation slightly. "My mother's going to try to destroy us in front of everyone who matters. Would you risk everything for someone who loves you for all the wrong reasons?" The ballroom smells like old money and fresh cruelty when they arrive on Saturday night, and John can taste both in the air before they even make it past the entrance, where a doorman in white gloves checks their invitation like he's guarding the gates of heaven. Crystal chandeliers hang from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls of light, and the marble floor is polished so perfectly that John can see his wheelchair reflected in it as he rolls forward with Sloane beside him in a silver gown that probably costs more than his fake apartment's yearly rent. Maya walks between them wearing a velvet dress that Sloane bought without asking, her small hand gripping John's armrest like she knows something bad is coming. Every head in the ballroom turns to watch them enter, and the whispers start immediately, like someone released a swarm of wasps into the room. Is that really Sloane Vance? With him? And a child? Oh my God. There's actually a child. The string quartet in the corner stops playing mid-note, and the silence that follows feels like the moment before a car crash when you know it's coming, but you're powerless to stop it. Eleanor Vance stands at the center of the ballroom wearing diamonds that catch the light like tiny knives. And she's 60 years old but looks 40 because of surgeons who charge by the miracle and personal trainers who cost more than most people's cars. Her smile could freeze water as she watches them approach, and John can see the calculation happening behind her eyes, the way she's already planning exactly how to destroy them in the most public way possible. She crosses the floor with footsteps that announce her importance, and the crowd parts around her like she's Moses walking through the Red Sea, and cameras flash from every direction because everyone wants to document this moment for social media and gossip columns and whatever other ways rich people destroy each other for entertainment. "Sloane?" Eleanor says, and her voice drips with honey that's been mixed with battery acid. "How lovely of you to bring your charity project to our little gathering." "Mother," Sloane replies, and her voice is completely flat and emotionless, like she's shut down every part of herself that feels things. Eleanor's eyes slide down to John with the kind of look people give to roadkill on the highway. Not quite human enough to deserve sympathy, but disgusting enough to notice. She doesn't look at his face or his eyes or anything that might remind her he's a person. She just stares at the wheelchair and his department store tuxedo and Maya's second-hand dress shoes that don't quite match her outfit. "This must be your latest attempt to rebel against your father and me," Eleanor says. And the words are designed to cut deep and bleed slow. How predictable, Sloane. How desperately predictable. John's hands tighten on the armrests, hard enough to make his knuckles ache, and Maya presses closer to his side like she's trying to make herself smaller and less visible. "His name is John," Sloane says, and there's a tiny crack in her voice that only someone listening carefully would catch. "And this is Maya, And they're here because I invited them. Eleanor laughs. And it's the worst sound John has ever heard, like breaking glass mixed with a wounded animal. Oh, darling, you think this little performance makes you noble? You think bringing this broken creature into our home proves something about your character? The ballroom goes completely silent, and even the waiters stop moving with their trays of champagne suspended in midair. He's not broken, Sloane says, and her voice cracks wider this time. Of course he is, sweetheart. Just look at him. Eleanor gestures at John with a wave of her hand that drips with contempt so thick you could bottle it and sell it as poison. He can't even stand on his own 2 feet, can't provide for himself or his child, can't do anything except sit there and look pathetic while you throw away your inheritance on some misguided rescue mission. John feels his jaw clench so hard his teeth might crack, and every muscle in his body coils tight like a spring compressed too far. He's using you, Sloane. Can't you see that? Eleanor steps closer, and her perfume is suffocating in a way that makes John want to gag. He's a parasite who latched onto you because you're stupid enough to confuse pity with love, and when you finally wake up and realize what he is, he'll have already drained you dry. Maya starts to cry, quiet tears that streak down her cheeks and drip onto her velvet dress, and John can feel his daughter trembling against his wheelchair. Eleanor turns her attention to Maya with the kind of smile that predators use right before they attack. And you, little girl, you're just the daughter of a man who's half a human being. She leans down so her face is level with Maya's, and her voice drops to a whisper that's somehow louder than shouting. You don't belong on these floors with your cheap dress and your second-hand shoes. You belong somewhere else, somewhere appropriate for children of cripples and charity cases. Sloane's entire body trembles with rage or fear or some combination of both, and John can see it happening in real time, can see her preparing to sacrifice everything she has, her inheritance and her name and her entire world, just to defend him and Maya from her mother's cruelty. For a man in a wheelchair, she thinks, has nothing. For a little girl, she's known for 3 weeks. For people she believes need her protection. John looks at Maya's tears and Sloane's trembling hands and Eleanor's cruel smile, and he makes a decision that will change everything. The experiment is over, and Sloane passed every test he didn't know he was giving her. You're right about one thing, Eleanor, John says, and his voice cuts through the silence like a blade through silk. Every eye in the ballroom turns to him. Every camera focuses on his face. Every phone starts recording. Don't belong on these floors. He reaches down and releases the wheelchair's brake with a click that echoes across the marble. And then John stands up. The ballroom gasps, a collective intake of breath that sounds like the air being sucked out of the room all at once. John stands on legs that work perfectly, on muscles that are strong and steady and completely functional, and he rises to his full height, which is several inches taller than Eleanor's careful posture. He reaches for the cheap tuxedo jacket and shrugs it off his shoulders, and underneath is a Tom Ford suit in midnight blue that costs more than most people earn in 6 months, tailored perfectly to his frame by someone who charges thousands of dollars just to take measurements. Eleanor's face goes white, like someone drained all the blood out of her body through a straw. John walks toward her, and each step is deliberate and powerful, and erases 3 weeks of lies with every footfall on the polished marble. He stops directly in front of Eleanor, eye to eye now, and his presence fills the space around him like thunder before lightning. My name is John Elliot, he says, And his voice booms across the ballroom, loud enough that even the people in the back can hear every word. "And I didn't come here for your daughter's money, or her pity, or anything else you think I wanted." The cameras flash like a lightning storm, and phones record from every angle. "I own Elliott Financial Group," John continues, and he pauses to let that information sink into Eleanor's horrified expression. "The firm that currently handles your family's debt portfolio. The one that could call in your loans tomorrow if I decided to make a single phone call." Someone in the crowd gasps, and whispers explode across the ballroom like wildfire. "I came here to see if your daughter had more heart than you do. If she was capable of loving someone she thought had nothing to offer except honesty and kindness." John turns to look at Sloane, who stands frozen with her face pale and her eyes wide with shock that might be betrayal. "It turns out she has enough heart for both of you and everyone else in this room combined." The ballroom erupts into chaos, whispers becoming shouts, cameras flashing faster, people pulling out phones to call their friends and spread this gossip before it even finishes happening. Eleanor sways on her expensive heels like she might faint, and her mouth opens and closes without any sound coming out. Sloane stares at John like he's a stranger she's never seen before, like the man she fell in love with just disappeared and was replaced by someone she doesn't recognize. Her eyes fill with tears, but they're not sad tears. They're angry ones that burn. She turns without saying a word and walks toward the ballroom exit with her silver gown trailing behind her like a storm cloud, and every step she takes sounds like a door slamming shut. John watches her go while still holding Maya's hand, his daughter looking up at him with confusion written all over her paint-stained face. "Daddy," Maya whispers, "why can you walk?" "I'll explain everything, sweetheart," John says quietly. "I promise." Eleanor finally finds her voice, and it comes out strangled and weak. You lied to her. You lied to all of us." "Yes," John says, turning back to face her with no apology in his expression. "I lied to see if your daughter was real, if she was different from people like you who measure human worth by bank accounts and leg function." He looks at the crowd of wealthy people recording this on their phones, at all the faces that show nothing but hunger for scandal. "She is different, which is more than I can say for everyone else here." He kneels down so he's eye level with Maya, and his legs bend easily like they've been working perfectly this whole time. "Come on, baby. Let's go home." They walk toward the exit together, John's footsteps echoing across the marble floor that's suddenly silent, except for the sound of Eleanor collapsing into a chair and her diamonds clinking against each other like broken promises. The doors close behind them, and John stands in the hallway outside the ballroom, finally upright, finally honest, finally free from the lie he's been living for 3 weeks, but completely alone except for his daughter, because the woman who loved him, when she thought he had nothing, just walked away, and he doesn't know if she'll ever come back. Can love survive a lie, even when the lie proved the love was real? Sloane doesn't answer her phone for 4 days straight, and John calls every morning and every night, and several times in between, leaving voicemails that go straight to digital deletion without ever reaching human ears. The penthouse door stays locked with a security system that won't recognize his fingerprint anymore, and the gates to her estate downtown slam shut whenever his car approaches like she programmed them to reject him specifically. Maya asks the same question every morning while eating breakfast at the kitchen table in their real house, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the city skyline that costs more money than most people see in their entire lives. Is Sloane coming today? John doesn't know how to answer that question because he doesn't know the answer himself. Doesn't know if the woman who fell in love with a poor, paralyzed single dad will ever forgive the billionaire who lied to her for 3 weeks straight. On the 4th day, a delivery arrives at the front door in a small box wrapped in brown paper, And inside is the ring John gave Sloane during week 2 of their arrangement, the cheap costume jewelry from the discount store that she wore like it was worth millions. There's no note, no explanation, no message, except the absence of the ring on her finger, and John sits at his real kitchen table in his real house, holding the fake ring and feeling like his chest is being crushed by something invisible. Maya draws at the granite countertop with her crayons scattered across the expensive surface, and she doesn't look up when she speaks. She's mad at you. I know, John says. But she still loves you. John looks at his daughter with her paint-stained fingers and her uneven pigtails. How do you know that? Maya holds up her latest drawing, and it's Sloane again, tall and proud with her crown of gold triangles. But this time purple tears stream down her stick-figure face in rivers that pool at her feet. Because people don't cry when they stop caring, Maya says, with the kind of wisdom that shouldn't exist in someone who still loses her baby teeth. They only cry when it hurts too much to keep loving someone. John's throat closes up, and he reaches for his phone to call someone he never thought he'd ask for help, someone who tried to destroy him just 4 days ago in front of everyone who matters in this city. Eleanor Vance answers on the first ring, like she's been waiting for this call. Come to grovel? No, John says, and his voice is steady, even though his hands shake. I'm calling to make a deal. There's silence on the other end. And then Eleanor laughs. But it's different from her cruel ballroom laugh. It's smaller and almost human. I'm listening. You want your daughter back in your life, John says. I want her to forgive me for lying. We both need Sloane to open the door she locked between herself and the people who hurt her. What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Elliot? An apology, John says. A real one, public and documented, where you admit what you said at the gala was cruel and wrong. He pauses. You acknowledge that Sloane makes her own choices about her life, and you step back from controlling her. Eleanor is quiet for so long, John thinks she might have hung up. But then he hears her breathing on the other end. And what do I get in return for this humiliation? Your daughter, John says simply. Not as a pawn you move around your chessboard, not as a business asset you leverage for social climbing, but as a person who might actually want to have a relationship with you. Another long pause filled with the sound of Eleanor thinking, calculating, weighing options like she's been doing her entire life. You're either very brave or very stupid, Mr. Elliot, she finally says. Maybe both, John admits. Eleanor sighs, and it's the sound of someone who's tired of fighting battles that only create more battles. Fine, I'll do your public apology spectacle. But if Sloane still hates you after this, you disappear from her life permanently and completely. Deal, John says. The press conference happens at noon on Tuesday outside the Vance estate, and Eleanor stands at a podium with microphones pointed at her like weapons while reporters lean forward with their recording devices and their hungry expressions. She wears white instead of her usual black, and her face looks older today, tired in a way that expensive makeup can't quite hide. I owe my daughter an apology, Eleanor begins, and her voice shakes slightly, like she's not used to admitting she was wrong about anything. What I said at the gala last Saturday was unforgivable and cruel. The reporters scribble notes and adjust their cameras. I treated a good man and his innocent child with contempt because I was afraid of losing control over my daughter's life, Eleanor continues, and she looks directly into the camera like she knows Sloane is watching from somewhere. I punished Sloane for being stronger and braver than I ever was, and I'm done doing that. Cameras flash across her face. Sloane, If you're watching this, I'm sorry for everything I said and everything I've done to try to control your choices." Eleanor's hands grip the podium. "Your life is yours, not mine, and you have every right to love whoever you choose to love, regardless of what I think about it." She steps away from the podium without taking questions, without explaining further, without doing any of the things politicians and rich people usually do to manage their public image. John watches from his car parked down the street with Maya in the back seat, and his phone buzzes with a text from an unknown number that makes his heart hammer against his ribs. Rooftop garden. 1 hour. Come alone. The rooftop garden sits 20 stories above the city on top of Sloane's building, and the December air is cold enough to burn when John steps out of the elevator and sees her standing at the edge, looking out at the skyline. She doesn't turn when he approaches, doesn't acknowledge his presence, even though she must hear his footsteps on the concrete. "You lied to me," Sloane says quietly, her voice barely louder than the wind. "Yes," John says, "because there's no point in denying it or making excuses. You made me fall in love with someone who doesn't exist." "No." John steps closer, but not too close. "The man you fell in love with is exactly who I am. The wheelchair and the money and the expensive house, none of that changes what happened in that cramped apartment with peeling paint." Sloane finally turns to face him, and her eyes are red from crying, from not sleeping, from the kind of pain that comes from betrayal. "You tested me, like I was some kind of experiment you were running." "I did," John admits without flinching, "and I was wrong to do it that way. But you passed, Sloane. You loved me when you thought I had nothing. You stayed up late with my daughter reading stories. You brought groceries. You held Maya when she had nightmares. You became part of our family. A family you built on lies," Sloane says, and her voice cracks. "One lie," John corrects. "One lie to protect us from people like your mother. To see if you were different from everyone else who measures human worth by bank accounts." He takes another step. "And you are different. You're everything I hoped you'd be, and more than I deserve." Sloane's face crumbles, and tears stream down her cheeks. "I don't know how to forgive this." "Then don't," John says softly. "Not yet. Not until you're ready. But let me prove that the man you loved is still here. That wealth or poverty or wheelchair or walking, I'm still the same person who brought you tea at midnight without asking. Who watched you fall asleep on our couch. Who saw you become the mother Maya never The wind
had.
whips Sloane's hair around her face, and she wraps her arms around herself like she's trying to hold the pieces together. "You broke my heart," she whispers. "I know," John says, "and I'll spend the rest of my life earning it back if you let me." Sloane closes her eyes, and more tears fall. "Maya drew me a picture. I know you're wearing a crown and crying purple tears. She said I wouldn't be sad if I didn't care." Sloane opens her eyes, and she's smarter than both of us combined. John reaches into his pocket and pulls out a small box. Not the costume jewelry from the discount store, but a real ring with a diamond that catches the winter sunlight and throws rainbows across the concrete like promises made of light. "Marry me," he says. "Not because you need a shield from your parents. Not because I need someone to prove I'm worthy. Marry me because in 3 weeks you became my family. And I don't want to lose that, even though I don't deserve it after what I did." Sloane stares at the ring, at him, at the city spread out below them like a map of all the possibilities they could have together. "I'm still angry," she says. "I know. I don't trust you yet. I'll earn it back. Maya comes first. Always. No matter what." "Always?" John agrees without hesitation. Sloane reaches out and takes the ring from the box, holding it in her palm and feeling its weight like she's measuring what it means to forgive someone who hurt you. "Okay," she whispers. John's breath releases in a rush he didn't know he was holding. "But you sleep on the couch for a month," Sloane continues, and her voice is stronger now. "And you tell me the truth about everything from now on. No more tests or experiments or lies about who you are." John laughs. Actually laughs. And it feels like the first real breath he's taken in days. "Deal." Sloane slides the ring onto her finger, and it fits perfectly, like it was made specifically for her hand. Below them, the city hums with traffic and life, and people going about their days without knowing that something broken just started healing 20 stories above their heads. Above them, the sky stretches endless and blue. And between them, something fragile begins to grow again. Something that looks like trust, mixed with hope, mixed with the kind of love that survives even when it probably shouldn't. How much would you sacrifice to prove your love was worth saving? The courthouse is small and simple. Nothing like the cathedral with stained glass windows that Eleanor probably imagined for her daughter's wedding when Sloane was born, but it's perfect in its plainness. Just John and Sloane standing in front of a judge with kind eyes, with Maya between them wearing her best dress and holding a basket of flower petals she keeps threatening to throw before the right moment. Eleanor sits in the back row with a tissue pressed against her lips, and for once in her life she's quiet and still and not trying to control anything. "Do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" the judge asks John, and his voice fills the small room with the weight of promises. John looks at Sloane in her simple white dress that makes her look younger and softer and more vulnerable than the Ice Queen he met at the Obsidian restaurant 6 weeks ago. Her hand trembles slightly in his, and he can feel her pulse racing through her fingers. "I do," he says. "And do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Sloane's eyes meet John's, and there's still hurt visible in them. Still healing happening in real time, but there's also something else that looks like hope mixed with determination. "I do," she whispers. Maya throws the flower petals before the judge finishes his sentence, and they scatter across the floor like snow, made of pink and white silk, and she cheers loud enough that the bailiff in the corner smiles despite his professional demeanor. Outside the courthouse, reporters wait with cameras and microphones, and questions they shout over each other, but John and Sloane ignore them completely. They walk to the car hand in hand with Maya swinging between them, her feet leaving the ground every few steps because they lift her up together. "Where are we going?" Sloane asks, as John starts the engine. "Home," he says. He drives them through the city toward the estate he's been hiding for 6 weeks, and Sloane's eyes widen as they pass through the security gates, wind through gardens maintained by a team of professionals, and pull up to a house that looks like it belongs in architectural magazines. "This is yours?" she asks, and her voice is quiet with something that might be awe. "Ours," John corrects. "If you want it to be." Sloane steps out of the car, and her heels click on the stone driveway as she turns in a slow circle, taking in the fountain and the perfectly trimmed hedges in the house that's probably 10 times bigger than the cramped apartment where she fell in love with someone she thought had nothing. Maya runs ahead toward the front door with her flower basket swinging from her arm, and her laughter echoes off the stone and the water and the expensive landscaping. "It's too big," Sloane says, and she sounds overwhelmed. "We'll fill it," John replies, taking her hand again, "with family and noise and life and all the things big empty houses need to become homes." Sloane looks at him with tears in her eyes again. But these are different tears. the kind that come from too much emotion instead of too much pain. You really think this can work after everything that happened? I think you loved me in a cramped apartment with peeling paint and second-hand furniture, John says carefully. I think you stayed up late with my daughter even though you didn't have to. I think you stood up to your mother for a man in a wheelchair who you believed had nothing except a good heart. He squeezes her hand. If that's not real love, I don't know what is. Sloane's tears fall. The good kind, that water new growth instead of drowning old roots. I'm still mad at you, she says. I know, and you should be. I'm going to be mad for a while, maybe months. I'm counting on it, John says. Gives me time to earn back what I broke. She kisses him then, soft and quick and full of promise instead of conclusion, and Maya runs back to grab both their hands. Can I pick my room? Maya asks, with her face flushed from running. Pick 3, John says. 1 for sleeping, 1 for art, and 1 for all the stuffed animals you're definitely going to collect. Maya squeals and runs inside through the front door that Eleanor's driver holds open, and her footsteps echo through the marble foyer. Sloane watches her go with something soft in her expression. She's happy. So are you, John says. Sloane looks at him with surprise. How do you know? Because you're not checking your phone every 30 seconds. She laughs, actually laughs, and the sound fills the space between them like music finally finding the right notes. 6 months pass faster than anyone expects, and the house transforms from a museum into something alive. Maya's paintings cover the walls in frames that cost more than the art itself, and Sloane's work files stack on the kitchen counter next to John's coffee mugs in a mess that the housekeeper complains about weekly. The marble floors get scuffed from wheelchair tracks on John's bad days and from Maya's light-up shoes on every day, and nobody bothers to polish them back to perfection, because perfection isn't the point anymore. Eleanor visits on Sunday afternoons, and she still wears her diamonds and her expensive clothes, but now she sits on the floor when Maya wants to show her paintings, and her knees crack when she stands up, and she's learning slowly how to apologize for things she did years ago. Sloane and John fight sometimes, about money and decisions, and whether to sell the cramped apartment or keep it as a reminder of where they started. They argue about how much to tell Maya about the wheelchair test and when to tell her, and sometimes the fights end with slammed doors and sleeping in separate rooms. But they also laugh together late at night, stay up talking about things that matter and things that don't, read Maya bedtime stories with voices for all the characters, and slowly learn how to trust each other with the broken pieces they both carry. One night after Maya falls asleep, Sloane finds John in his study standing at the window and looking out at the city lights spread below like stars that fell to earth. You're walking, she observes. Sometimes, John says. When the pain isn't too bad, she comes to stand beside him at the window. Were you ever really paralyzed? Or was that part of the lie too? I was paralyzed for 2 years after the accident, John says quietly. They told me I'd never walk again, and I spent 6 months in physical therapy proving them wrong. He looks at her. The wheelchair is real, Sloane. Some days I need it because my legs don't work right or the pain is too much. I wasn't lying about that part. Sloane processes this information in silence. You could have told me. I could have, John agrees. But then I wouldn't have seen who you really are when you thought I had nothing to offer except myself. He turns to face her fully. And you're magnificent, Sloane, even when you're angry at me. She leans her head against his shoulder. I love you, you know. The real you, all of you, the parts that walk and the parts that don't, John says. That's why I married you. They stand there in the darkness, watching the city breathe and move and live below them. Do you regret it? Sloane asks quietly. The test, the wheelchair, all of it. John thinks about this question, really thinks, because she deserves a real answer. I regret hurting you. I don't regret discovering that you have the biggest heart of anyone I've ever met, that you're capable of loving people for who they are instead of what they have. Sloane smiles against his shoulder. That's a politician's answer. Then I'll give you a real one. He turns so they're facing each other, his hands on her shoulders. No, I don't regret it, because now I get to spend the rest of my life proving that I'm worthy of that heart you gave to someone you thought was broken. She kisses him, long and deep and full of the kind of promise that takes years to fulfill. Upstairs, Maya sleeps in her enormous bedroom, surrounded by paintings she made, and stuffed animals she collected, and dreams about families that choose each other instead of being born into each other. And in the morning, they'll all wake up together in a house that's too big for 3 people, but exactly the right size for a family that's still learning how to be a family. Because love isn't about where you start or what you have, or whether your legs work every single day. It's about who stands beside you when you finally find the courage to stand up and tell the truth. What would you sacrifice to protect the people who love you for exactly